So this was supposed to be part of the first video on how to keep your paints wet, because adhesion is something important to consider when diluting your paints with anything, but I messed up and then the camera messed up, so I redid this from scratch and hopefully more detailed. Now, I'm doing these tests according to Golden's suggestions. I actually found two different instructions from them on how to test this. One was in reply to someone where I think the test was incorrectly described, and then later a different set on their site, which is how I think they actually do things, and what I'll be demonstrating here. So I'll put the links to that in the description if you're interested. Anyways, first you need your substrate. You can test just about any surface you want. Just be careful. Some, like canvas paper, will rip. Even though they don't seem that absorbent, it's still made out of like a paper-like material. And this isn't necessary with regular paper. You can dilute as much as you like, and I talk a bit about that in the first video. In this case, I'm testing plastic with 4 different surfaces, really 3. I already know the paint doesn't adhere well to the glossy side at all, so I'm just testing on the matte side, and I also know actually that they don't stick well to this side either, but I'm including it so you can see how much of a difference there is, because the paint might appear to stick just fine when you put it on thickly, but in reality, the physical bond is very weak. So on the left is the plastic alone, next is a sanded section, and then sanded and gessoed. The last is also sanded and gessoed, but I just wanted to see if there was any difference between the craft and professional grades of paint, so I kind of added that in there. So I prepped all my surfaces, and then I got my palette and made the dilutions for the paint. They don't have to be super exact. I just used the palette knife to grab about an equal amount to a drop of paint, so then I could just use drops of water and count them to get the correct ratio. I started with the thinnest mixture first, but it doesn't really matter as long as you wash and wipe your brush between dilutions. Now, in these high dilutions, you can immediately see that the paint beads up on the matte side of the plastic, and just sanding it helps alleviate that a lot. The only real difference between the sanded and the gessoed areas really is the difference in texture. If you put the 2 perpendicular layers of gesso, it really helps it look and feel more like canvas, if you like that. But as you'll see later, there's not much of a difference in terms of adhesion. So once everything is there, I let it dry. Golden says they do tests at varying intervals up to 2 weeks, and more than that makes little difference. But for doing one test, 72 hours is fine. So here it's been about 80 now. And once those 3 days have passed, you want to grab an X-Acto knife and just very gently cut a grid into all the paint swatches. You want to try to cut the paint film, but not the surface below. Once it's all cut, place some masking tape over each sample, and I fold the end to make it easy to peel. And then next, Golden recommends you burnish the tape as I'm doing with the handle of the scissors. But even if you don't, it'll still be very apparent if the paint is severely underbound. When I peel the tape off, I cut the folded end and I put them in one of those plastic sheet protectors. So that way they're easy to store and I can scan them. As you can see, the matte side is out of the question in my opinion, but all the rest are quite good, even at the higher dilutions. I was actually just going to do a 1 to 5 dilution in the last row, but if I had, I probably wouldn't have had many noticeable differences at all. So I purposely did a really high 1 to 10 dilution to show you there's a point at which the paint does start to come off. Additionally, there wasn't much of a difference between the crafts and the professional grade. What there was in the And the 1 to 10 dilution probably happened because my two samples started to bleed into each other, and I had to wipe some of them away. So that's just the little minor difference you see between those. Still, even though everything looks okay, these professional paints were a national brand, and as you'll see in a second, I'm not sure they're the best quality, but that's all there is. Anyways, you can check out the full image and take a closer look over at my site. So that's how to test the swatches. But if you're worried about a painting, there's ways to test one without cutting into it. So here I have the skull painting I did the other week with a lot of heavily diluted water, and I was kind of worried about it. So first, before testing the painting, I recommend you wait at least 2 to 3 weeks, and then to start, I start by rubbing the painting with my fingers, and if paint is rubbing off onto your fingers at that point, it's definitely underbound. If it's not too much, you can probably save it with a clear layer of acrylic medium. The only problem is that when you paint that onto the painting, if the the paint is too loose beneath it, it'll start to mix in with the clear acrylic medium, and that'll mess up your painting. So maybe you want to test in a small area. Now, if the painting was fine, nothing rubbed off. Next, what I did was I rubbed the painting lightly with a cotton swab. Now, this had been suggested in the reply by Golden, but I'm not sure how accurate it is. Paintings and swatches I've done with Golden paints rub off very little or not at all. The professional national brand, though, which is definitely professional if we're going by pigment load, rubs off a bit more, and then crafts grade rubs off the most. Here, for example, at first I thought that the red glazed background was underbound because it was rubbing off. The rest of the painting rubbed off very little, and the gray areas painted over the background didn't rub off at all. So at first, like I said, I thought it was because I'd painted more thickly in those areas and too thinly in the others, so it was underbound. But then I remembered that the black and white paints I'm using are still from Golden, and when I went to test their paints, they rubbed off less than the national brand I was using them with that I had painted the red background. So I'm not sure what's happening. If it's maybe it's the gloss that gives the paint more protection because the Golden paints are definitely glossier, or maybe the national brand here isn't that good. I don't really know, and unfortunately, I don't have any other paints to test this with. So this isn't the most definitive test. Maybe for testing if the paint is underbound. I would still do it, but I would test your own paints at full thickness after 2 weeks or so to have some sort of baseline to compare to, because maybe it's natural for them to rub off a bit and it's nothing to panic about. Again, a clear layer of medium will definitely more than protect it. And if, like this painting, you don't have any rubbing off on your fingers, but you do have some rubbing off on the cotton swab, it should be fine, as long as you're not like trying to like scrub the layer of medium on top of it and pushing your brush down too much, and you have a light touch. I didn't have any problems with the color shifting or anything. I think the only problem would be if there was a noticeable shift in color when you rub the cotton swab, which means it's taking off an entire layer. But if that's not happening, you should be fine. Otherwise, if your painting has survived all that, I would move on to test it with tape. So first, just gently laying it, then I just progressively rub it in more and more. Careful not to go too near the edges though, or I might want to peel the paint off the edge. As you can see, nothing lifted here, which is what further convinced me that everything was fine. After this, of course, I put a clear layer of medium anyway, to serve as an isolation layer between the varnish, like I do with all my paintings. Anyways, if you found the video helpful, please consider subscribing or following me on any of my social media sites. I also have a website, and if you want to help support me, I have a Patreon.